activities of Prime Minister. So, for example, when I accompanied Prime Minister Kishida to Indonesia, Jakarta, naturally our Prime Minister's office website covers the bilateral meeting, summit meeting between Prime Minister Kishida and President Joko. And of course, since Indonesia is going to host G20 summit in Bali, the Prime Minister Kishida is very much looking forward to collaborating with the presidency of G20, President Joko. Of course, President Joko came to Japan, and so we have been in very close touch with each other. On this particular meeting, I guess this is something which there's a kind of limit as to how much information we may be releasing based on various activities of Prime Minister. We are focusing on major diplomatic or domestic activities of Prime Minister, and there is a kind of issue of selection of those engagement of the Prime Minister.
Rocky Swift with Reuters. A major issue facing Japan and other major economic allies is the shortage of chips, microchips, for cars and other industries. There's been talk lately about this Chip 4 alliance between the U.S., Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. Do you have any details on this alliance, such as the membership and any plans for initial meetings and where and when those meetings might be held? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Actually, I don't have much to add, in terms of possible kind of direction or cooperation, for this Chip 4 alliance. But as I mentioned, in the context of economic security, semiconductor issue is something which the Japanese government is focused on, and this semiconductor itself is a very strategically important industry. Of course, Japan used to, Japanese companies used to have larger shares in the global markets in the semiconductor industry, and there is the angle of reviving Japanese semiconductor industry. As you're aware, in Kyushu, there is new investment coming from TSMC, and the Japanese government is financially supporting that investment. Between the United States and Japan, we have been discussing, those what kind of cooperation we could promote between the two countries, which naturally involve private companies too. So in cutting edge, science area, we are promoting various cooperation, especially between Japan and the United States, in areas like AI, quantum computing, biotechnology, and semiconductor. So there are wide-ranging issues. And as we kind of engage with our the business partners, in due course, there may be a better collaboration among the countries that you mentioned.
Thank you. I have a few questions online. Please let me ask one of them as they came in order, and then we will go back to the floor. This question is from Koichi Sasazawa from the Yomiuri Shimbun. He wrote a long explanation about the dispute between Japan and China in the economic zone. He said, despite repeated warning from Japan, China never stopped illegal maritime scientific research in Japan's EEZ without consent. which UNCLOS stipulated. Reportedly, China is probably interested in rare metal earths in the surface of the mud layer in the ocean floor there. On the other hand, China doesn't hope UN to designate continental shelf extension regarding the southern Kyushu plate, Palau Ridge, due to concentration of with China's second archipelago and line strategy. He explains a lot about this area. China may be trying to find an evidence that proves the ridge area is not continental shelf extension. So the question is, how is Japanese government analyzing and assessing Chinese intention for such illegal activities? And also, don't you think Japan's strong protest through diplomatic channels cannot already prevent these repeated compliance violations by China? Do you have alternative on this regard? Thank you.
Of course, earlier this month, there was an incident of the launch of ballistic missiles by China into waters near Japan, including Japan's exclusive economic zone. And from our viewpoint, this is a serious problem concerning the security of Japan and the safety of the Japanese people. So, based on this, we strongly condemned and protested these Chinese actions and called for the immediate suspension of military drills, as China's recent activities have a serious impact on the peace and stability of the region and the international community. Of course, Sasazawa-san's question is more focused on, as I understand, delimitation of the delimitation of the ocean between Japan and China. And as I recall, we agreed in 2008, I believe, to negotiate this issue. And there is a difference of views between China and Japan on this issue. Our view is that the median line is the basis for the possible delimitation. But as I mentioned, China takes different viewpoints, and we have conducted some consultations in the past, which have not led to the agreement yet. And our consistent position is that we should continue to negotiate based on the international law, and while we are negotiating, there should not be any attempts to unilaterally changing the status quo, including kind of dispatching the search vessels or any attempts to develop underground resources, energy resources, and possibly some other rare earth or metals, as was mentioned.
He actually asked, do you have any other means other than diplomatic means? Like, would Japan send some military ships to prevent China from doing this? Is that you consider it your own zone?
Well, as I mentioned, we between the two governments, we agreed, to negotiate, consult with each other, and as I mentioned, Japan is committed to continue to negotiate with the Chinese side, and this is something which is essential to reach constructive and stable relation between the two countries. And we are of the view that the multi-layered the communication between the two countries, the governments, is very important. So, as many of you know, earlier this week, our National Security Advisor, Mr. Akiba, visited Tenchin and had a dialogue with Mr. Yang Jiechi for like 7 hours. So this is part of the resumption of regular dialogues that we have been conducting between the two governments, and due to COVID, we have not been holding these bilateral dialogue, and we are resuming. So, and of course, we have from the Japanese side, we have raised a number of issues, including as related to Taiwan or Ukraine or North Korea.
Thank you. Another question line from here, the media, is Sky 24. He asked exactly, as for Europe, Japan's interests, especially economic ones, don't necessarily coincide with those of the US, United States. Don't you think Japan should try to develop its own foreign policy, especially toward China, instead of blindly following the US, according to Pierre de Mille? What's
I think my basic view is very different from the view that was expressed by him, and of course, in terms of Japan's foreign security policy, U.S. alliance is extremely important. But as I just mentioned, we are bilaterally engaging, for example, with China, and also we have been collaborating very closely with EU members and UK. Of course, in the context of G7 summit process, and when Prime Minister Kishida attended NATO summit for the first time as Japanese Prime Minister, he is engaging with NATO members more closely. And my view is that neither no G7 leaders are engaging with other Asian leaders as intensive as Prime Minister Kishida, especially since March. And as I mentioned, Japan has been taking very straightforward positions in the context of sanctions against Russia and supporting Ukraine. So this is a very firm view, and we have our own messages that we are conveying to our European friends and American friends as well. Thank you.
Yuri Kagiyawa with Associated Press. I want to ask you about the Unification Church, which has risen in the news like unexpectedly because of Mr. Abe's assassination. And Mr. Kishida has reshuffled the cabinet to reduce the number of people allegedly associated with the Unification Church, but it turns out there's more or just the same. So first of all, what is your ties, if any, to the Unification Church? And please tell us about that. And given that we're finding out that the Unification Church, the relationship that Mr. Abe and others played within the Unification Church was such a key part of Japan's foreign policy, What do you think about that? You know, if you could give us your views as a foreign policy expert.
Well, thank you very much for your question. With regard to issues as related to the so-called, former unification church, Japanese or Prime Minister Kishida's view is that we need to be extremely careful not to arouse suspicion among the Japanese public regarding relationship with an organization that has been pointed out, to cause various problems in society. So, in the context of cabinet reshuffle, PM Kishida also instructed that each cabinet member should examine their relationship with the organization concerned in his or her responsibility as a member of parliament, and strictly review the relationship based on the results of such inspection. So as you mentioned, several cabinet ministers have revealed, they had relationship with the organization in the past, but have all mentioned, that they will review their relationships, going forward. And in addition, PM Kishida instructed the Minister of Justice and other relevant cabinet members to make every possible effort to cooperate in providing, counseling on malicious business practices, such as so-called spiritual sales, which is incidents where people are talked into buying very expensive jars and other items, and this could involve coercion. So those some of those activities could prove to be illegal activities, and as you heard, Minister of Justice convened first this kind of meeting along with other senior officials from other ministries, including National Police Agency or Consumer Affairs Agency, to address these issues. So the government is aware of these potential problems and trying to address these issues to prevent illegal activities or malicious business practices, or try to support those victims. Thank you.
I have also last question online from Karine Shimura. She is Radio France and Libération newspaper, French. She asked, Labour Party tends since decades to invest in concrete rather than human. Why do you think it will change with Prime Minister Kishida? As you know, Japan was first in digital transformation in late 90s and early 2000s, but is now late compared with many other countries. Did you really analyze the reason why Japan is no more innovative and stops to lead the technologies in the world? Thank you.
I kind of agree to the views expressed to some extent, but not entirely. The PM Kishida recognizes the challenges that the Japanese society or Japanese economy have been facing. So that's why he is proposing this concept of new form of capitalism. And as I explained in my initial presentation, PM Kishida is not talking about concrete or the concrete projects in terms of infrastructure. He's more talking about in terms of government role as related to digital. Government will be responsible, for securing digital infrastructure, but more focused on investing in people. So there are emerging reforms of our education system, especially as related to higher education, to realize more startups. And we are of the view, that although there have been shortages or deficiencies in terms of track record, we would be realizing more competitive industries in close collaboration with the government and the business sectors. Thank you.
Thank you. Shikada-san agreed kindly to extend the session a few more minutes, so Tom will have a question.
Thomas Sullivan, Shigata-san, associate member. Good to see you again. My question is about TCAD 8 and the Ukraine crisis. It looks like the Prime Minister is going on to a continent next week where there is a considerable amount of support for the Russian position. And the Russian Defense Minister mentioned 2 days ago that the military leaders of 9 African countries were in Moscow with him to discuss, security issues. And Macky Sall, the president of Senegal, recently met with Putin in Sochi. So I'm just wondering, will the Prime Minister be taking this up with the African leaders when he meets with them next week in Tunisia? And just to finally mention, apparently, outside the Russian embassy in Addis Ababa, there are huge queues of Ethiopians who want to join the Russian military forces. So again, this indicates that there is a considerable amount of support for Russia on the continent. Thank you.
Prime Minister Kishida's view is that the emerging challenges in terms of food security, food prices, and energy security issues were brought by Russian invasion of Ukraine, and I expect that he will make that point. And this is something he has been trying to kind of persuade so far with Asian leaders, including Indian Prime Minister Modi or ASEAN leaders. As I mentioned, there are different viewpoints based on history, historical relationship, and commercial ties. As you are aware, some African countries import so much, for example, Russian wheat, right? And so there could be some countries in the region, that may want to preserve, that relationship. But PM Kishida has been making the case that, for example, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is not European issue. This, for example, Asian security issues are inseparable from European security landscape. So we are all connected. So this logic applies to Africa or Southeast Asia or other regions of the world. If you allow unilateral change of status quo by one party violating international law, that would undermine the foundation of international society. So this is the case that PM Kishida has been making, and I'm sure that these kind of views would be expressed. And this requires continuous diplomatic engagement and efforts. So this is something if he goes to UN General Assembly next month, these are kind of issues again we'll be taking up, and we wish to collaborate with African countries for UN reform, including UN Security Council reform, because in many cases the vetoes from Russia or China are basically kind of paralyzing the functions of the Security Council. Thank you.
Tanaka Koichiro from Keio University, also the honorary member of the CCJ. The question is again with TICAD. First of all, I would like to wish the Prime Minister Kishida for success in TICAD 8 in Tunisia. TICAD, as I understand, has been facing challenges from China in the African continent in recent years. But now we see that Russia, as just mentioned, is also trying to enter this kind of a game and competition with the others. Now, what will be the success, key to the success of TICAD 8, given the circumstances that there's a rising tension, not only in the African continent, but also amongst the world leaders that are actually trying to hold a better, I would say, establish a better relationship with the African countries?
We are proposing the idea of kind of principles for development finance in the context of G7 and other international fora. And these development finance needs to be based on principles such as transparency or openness and sustainable finance. And as we see in the case of, for example, Sri Lanka's situation, if there could be projects which go against those principles, those projects may not be viable, and those recipient governments or countries would suffer at the end of the day. So this is something we see, and so we are coming up with the case that how we could promote sustainable development in the long term, and this requires quality infrastructure and openness and transparency of those, for example, loan agreements would be very important. And some of those countries, go to Paris Club, but when you see some of the third-party loan agreements are not made public, the countries, get into trouble in recovering, from the so-called, debt trap. So we are making the case, based on our own, experiences and the good practices of sustainable development. And we are also worried about some of the kind of dissemination of false information, sometimes disinformation, and especially after Russian invasion of Ukraine, and when we follow some of the media landscape, there are kind of dissemination by the third party in terms of misguided messages, and so we are also aware of the need to address those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the last question online from Yodimilia in Sky 24. He asked about Burma. Japan has never withdrawn support from for the military regime that overthrew Myanmar democratically elected government in February 21. Japan has also withheld diplomatic and humanitarian support for the shadow national unity government. And while a few companies like Kirin pulled out of the country, Mitsubishi Corp remains an investor in the Yatagon offshore gas field, which has provided a financial lifeline for the military regime. Don't you think Japan should take a braver approach toward the military junta, starting maybe by stopping Japan's self-defense forces training Myanmar military personnel, which is still continuing? Failure to do so is tantamount, is like supporting the war crime, according to his words. Thank you.
On the issues surrounding Myanmar, we have been deeply, concerned, about the current situation. And for example, when Prime Minister Kishida went to Cambodia, Cambodia as I guess a chair of ASEAN in terms of engaging with Myanmar, the foreign minister was preparing for the visit to Myanmar. And we are supportive for ASEAN's efforts to address Myanmar problems. And of course, we are attentive to the human rights issues that have been ongoing in Myanmar. As you're aware, the Prime Minister Kishida appointed the human rights, the special advisor, former minister, defense minister Nakatani. So we are of the view that through engaging with the Myanmar side, we wish to kind of realize the return of Myanmar to the democracy and better human rights protection. So this is the ongoing process, and this may not be realized only by Japan. We are closely collaborating with other countries concerned, especially in ASEAN. Thank you.
Thank you, Chikatsu-san. This will be my last question. Actually, it's a request. I am asking on behalf of many of my colleagues in the Press Club and FPIG. The country used to hold press briefing for journalists with mobile press card at the country itself. And that was very useful for us, and it seems it stopped for some reason we don't know. So you are the best person here to tell us about the future of this invitations, if we can get it back again, and we can establish a direct line between us and the country and on the Japanese official issues. So do you have any good news for us on this front?
Well, I heard your message, and I guess it's probably the first time that somebody with my position came to FCCJ to give a talk. My intention is to give briefings, especially to international journalists regarding Prime Minister Kishida's priority policy issues. And I will bring back this issue to PMO, and I'm very much looking forward to kind of revitalizing our engagements.
Thank you very much in advance. I also want to mention that I attended most of your briefings after the earthquake 2011. It was held at the country almost on a daily basis, and you really provide us with a very good insights about the issues. So we are happy to hear that you are going most likely to continue this. Chikatsu-san, we would like to offer you a 1-year honorary membership to our club. You can come anytime for a year, and you can enjoy talking to us, and we also benefit from your visit. Please come as many times as possible. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming today, and please give a big hand again for Chikata-san. ざいます。
Thank you very much.